America going back and forth, just like it's taxes. They rebel against the taxes. They send more taxes. They just rebel against the taxes over and over again. Um, like the Tea Act, the Townsend Acts, the Stamp Act was just crazy. I mean, it seems like a small fee you had to pay for like paper documents and all that stuff, but like it's just maybe if they asked them, like maybe if they got together in court and said, "Hey, we should discuss about like taxes and stuff like that," maybe it would have been different. Maybe it could have played out instead of just dropping these taxes on them out of nowhere. And this is what the government decided. This is what like Rousseau was talking about, how the government just decides things without ever speaking with the people. That's why these people are mad because they keep dropping stuff onto them, different acts, and like assigning taxes that these people don't even want to pay. Like I don't even buy tea, so like why should I have to pay for tea? Waste my, whatever was expensive back then. Like I don't know, I forget the range, but like why should I have to waste my 70 cents for tea if I don't like tea? But that's what they had to do. They had to keep buying tax and paying tax and stuff like that for things they didn't even want. So that's what Locke, or not Locke, Rousseau was thinking about at the time. Rousseau said, hey, it's not right that the government and the rich get to decide how the poor people should live and what laws they should live by so that it comforts their own needs. It's just not right. It's in a sense it's just like, just like I said, just brutalizing them and stuff. Um what else is there? Oh, so Great Britain becomes dominant. This was crazy. So I remember like back in the day, in my like 2 years ago, my freshman year, when we talked about world history, like America said, or the founding fathers said, never have defense treaties with Britain. And the defense treaty being being never have if I go silent, I'm sorry, just you know, but never have a defense treaty with Britain. And the thing is, it's just because Britain's always in war. And it's true, Britain was always getting into war around this time, so Britain wasn't really a great ally to have because this is America building a new country. If they keep going into war, they're going to keep using all their resources. And if they're not a fully developed country yet, they're just wasting resources to fight a war that they're not even belonging into. Um, but now, around this time, the Native Americans are very valued because you got to think about it. In America, the British, the French, and the Americans are all there. And the Native Americans just sit right there in the middle. And, the French could offer them a different price or something like that. They can give them this many guns and all that. And they can say, "You want to fight for us?" They say yes. And then they have people who know the land on their side, and that's a huge benefit. Or they could use them to gather intel. But like if the British gave them a different offer, those people could go fight for the British and have intel on the French, and they can use them against them. And it's just back and forth. But, you know, there are times where one guy says no, the other guy says no, and they're caught in the crossfire. But I remember reading about it how the Indian tribes, at least some of them, every one of them, what did I know they were called Hitchka Hasha, the river people. I wrote about them not too long ago. Um, let's see what we got here. What did I write about these guys? Don't tell me I can't find them because I know I wrote about them. But if I can't find it, I literally can just go off of my own brain. Probably just gonna have to go off the top of my head. Oh, my brain is like way loose on my hoodie. I always wear hoodies when I do podcasts and stuff like that just to get comfortable. But these guys, the Indians, were fighting as their own tribe, as their own faction. They weren't against the U.S. They were against Britain's policies. They didn't like what Britain stood for. They didn't like what they were doing to the Americans, but they never sided with the Americans. But if the Americans probably did engage in war with them, then they would have fought against them. But it says that they never wanted to fight with them. They fought as their own tribe on their own terms. Um, the craziest thing about it is I loved reading about New York at the time. So the middle colonies, because New York was a big thing for the middle colonies, was New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. New York being at the time before it was founded as New York, the Netherlands, because the Dutch were settling and the Dutch found New York. Here's my thing. So the middle colonies were seen as ugh, Yo, I'm really trying here. The middle colonies were seen as such a thriving area for farms. Like they were doing so good, and people say it's because of the rich soil and all that stuff. Like they had the good mild climate, they had the ocean and the rivers, they had everything. But here's the thing, right? I even mentioned this in my class too. So the middle class, so New York is like going to be acting as a big, big harbor, especially that it's on the east coast of the United States. So anybody coming from Britain or Africa or from any of the other middle countries like the Ottoman Empire, whatever, like are going to come, or Spain, are going to France, are going to come to New York because that's a successful harbor. So you have all these different people coming from Ireland, Europe, France, Germany, all these people. And what could these people be? These people could possibly be poor class people trying to make a better life for themselves. And what are poor class people usually tending to be? Farmers. So these farmers come over to America with the new rich soil they have and the new resources. They can take their plants and their seeds over from Europe and all that to America, and they can be better farmers, which is probably why the middle colonies are so successful because these people don't want to go far out from their original, they don't want to go as far out until they know they're ready for it. So they settle in New York and they start there and then they go from there. They build their career from the New York or the Netherlands and build outwards from it. That's why it's probably such a thriving farming area because these guys come from different types and different countries and stuff, so they have different plants to bring, and they can be better farmers here because they are experienced farmers for the new colonies, especially because these guys are going to sell fruits here and potatoes and all this other stuff, and the new colonies can thrive off of that. What about open at this point? But the big thing was it was really diverse. Like they had different religions. Like they had the Puritans and they had the Quakers. They had Dutch colonists. So dominance was really impossible at this point, but like it was a more diverse area of government because like or more diverse area of religion because like I said, you have people who are coming from different areas of the country and then different places in the country, but we have different religions and followed by different laws and abide by different laws religiously, and they come here and they're like, "I'll do my thing, you do your thing," and they are in different areas. And so all systems in the government in the middle class were elected by their own legislator. They were all democratic. They all had a governor and governors. In the middle colonies was mainly a priority, but New York started or sorry, was mainly a praetory, but New York started a royal colony. Yeah, like when you would come to New York, like you would have jobs as industry, cattle raising, shipbuilding, farming, and ironworks. Now, shipbuilding is makes because this is a big harbor at this time, and industries and ironworks are all going to be here because this is a main city. A lot of people are coming to this main city. Delaware, we see fishing and lumbering. New Jersey, we see ironworks and lumbering as well. Pennsylvania, you see papermaking, shipbuilding, cattle works, and textile, which, for those who don't know, is fabric. But most of these guys had grains, meats, and some corn. And the reason they were able to grow this is because they had mild climate and rich and long growing, and they had rich soil and long growing seasons. These farmers had a nickname breadbasket because they were so successful, and they did commercial farming. I think that about does it for my section in history. Oh yeah, actually, we can talk about the southern colonies really quickly. So we have Maryland, South and North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. And what they were growing was like things as tobacco, ricot, cotton, indigo, sugar, the main things, but main being tobacco. And a main area for them is Charleston. So yeah, they had plantation style. Their farming was commercial, and they were concentrated on agriculture and developed plantations exporting tobacco, cotton, corn, vegetables, grain, fruit, and livestock. But the best thing they wanted for them was they needed more exports and imports. You want more stuff going out than in. So I mean, it's crazy because here's the thing: up until like World War One, Britain is now becoming an empire very slowly. That's why they set out to do exploration and stuff like that. They're making colonies. They're making different areas to live in and stuff. That's why I find insane. Because during like World War II, or during World War I, they had India, Africa, and they helped the African rebels, or not African rebels, they helped the Arabian rebels, and it's just insane. They're a vast growing empire, and a lot of the empires actually fell after World War I, like Russia, and the Ottoman Empire, which is now modern day Turkey, and the Austrian Empire, and Germany, I want to say. Yeah, and the British Empire. My favorite quote is like, "The sun never sets on the British Empire." I love it. Um, but it was crazy because World War I is a big key factor for development in warfare. You have the first World War written on paper, the actual official World War, because other people argue that there are other times in history where there are other world wars and stuff like that. Like the 7 Years' War, you could argue is a world war between Africa and Asia, but this is the first world war written on paper. Um, but essentially, you have the soldiers. The famous quote really is that the guys rode in. They rode in on horses and they came out in tanks, planes, etc. So like you have people inventing new planes, new ways of warfare, aviation. You have different tanks going on the battlefield. Not mostly the tanks you'd think of like big like M1 Abrams or like big shoot tanks and all. I don't know what you call them, but like the ones you see in video games and stuff like that. We're talking about tanks really just focused on infantry, not so much fighting other tanks. These tanks were mostly used for infantry and trench warfare, and just to get one side to the other, like a support, for example. But like a machine gun, a bunch of machine guns stuck on a 360-degree tank body, moving very slowly over a trench. Because these tanks didn't get very far because um, of a lot of like deforestation from World War I. Especially we see a lot of that in World War II during the Blitzkrieg. I mean, the Blitzkrieg was like the Germans were just mowing through countries, going, taking them over, and we see a lot of that happen. And then as it goes on, it rains a lot, mud starts to crawl and all that stuff. So that's why like no man's land was impossible to cross because of all the barbed wire and no and mud. It's insane. And it just makes living conditions because in World War I we see them using trenches. It makes living conditions almost terrible because the trenches could flood. Now the difference between the British and the Germans were smart about trenching systems. The Germans were now they built straight trenches with little curves, and they were planning on staying there for a while. So they built their trenches according to how they wanted to live. They put planks on the floors, they'd build rooms, they'd have lights. They made it so where they can live there for a long time and stay there for a long time. The British, however, the one key thing that they did was they did zigzagging trenches, which is smart, and they built lines of trenches. So like you'd have your support, your fallback, and your officer's trench. The Germans do this as well, but most of the officers saw act on the front line as well. But the reason you want zigzagging instead of straight is in zigzagging, if a trench is collapsed, it cuts off a section. Straight, it could do that as well. Also, in straight, you have a long pathway where a soldier can sit and like shoot people who are coming down the other side of the trench. In zigzagging, you're carrying this long rifle through a short amount of trench. You really can't do that. You really can't, like, you can stick your arm out fully, and that's probably where the wall is going to be from, where you stick your arm back straight out, and that's probably going to be where the other wall is. So, like, you can imagine they would probably use more pistols than anything. But in the British trenches, they did not make them to where they were going to live there long enough. These were just quick and easy trenches they were building with the bare shovels on their back. And you would have problems with horses getting through, or they couldn't get through. Cargo was so like stuck in one place because it's so muddy and so deep. But that is the main key factor. And also, like, it would get flooded in the trenches, and these soldiers are wearing boots and they get wet socks sometimes. Then you have to deal with trench foot. It's where you almost want to saw your foot off. It's so bad, and they have to hang their rations by strings on top of the wooden board because of rats and all that. And rats are horrible because rats carry a bunch of disease. So the British did not see very well entrenching. They were thinking that they were going to be moving every single day, when the Germans were more smarter about it and knew that they had to defend there, so they wanted to build it where they could last there for a long time without support.